Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome back to Veterans in Conversation. My name is Scott Duncan and my co-host Barry Zworestine. We're here and we're back again. We have a fantastic guest. All of our guests are good, but I'm telling you, Dr. April Minatrea has graced us with her time. She has an incredible background, which you're going to hear about here shortly. We are thrilled to have her. Barry was telling me, "Hey, I've got somebody that I think is going to be a fantastic guest. What do you think?" And didn't take long to say, "Why do you even ask me? Let's let's get the good doctor on, and we'll have a great session with her." So we are thrilled today to have Dr. April Minatry with us. Barry, you have, as always, done a fantastic job. We try to split up the duties and, looking for folks to bring in. Barry's, but he's got me by a couple of folks. So this is going to be my work's cut out for me for finding the next guest or two. So with that, we want to welcome you. We thank you for your time. And instead of reading your bio, the only thing I'm going to say is she went to Texas A&M and then she went to Kansas, right?
Correct?
And Texas A&M, if you like football, hey, they're in the playoff system to go to the national championship. So good on them.
Gig
I'm a
Maggie's.
I'm a Texas Longhorn fan,
I
but
won't hold it against you.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's a whole nother story. But I'm thrilled for you guys, and best of luck to A&M for hopefully winning. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Barry. Barry, what do you got for us today?
Okay, well, I just want to welcome April. It is an absolute pleasure to have you here. I've been really blessed to have a couple of really long conversations with you, and just every second is like a drop of gold. So the fact that you've come on with us today and to share who you are and your journey is an absolute gift. But I'm not letting you get away without reading your background. So, April is a clinical psychologist, a leadership consultant, and a dream architect, and she dreams big. And also interwoven with those dreams is a way of understanding faith that we will talk about today. And as we've often talked about in the transition process, the three core components of faith, well-being, and tribe. Today we'll probably focus more on the faith aspect interwoven with a whole lot of other stuff. April is literally a powerhouse of transformation. She is. For 25 years, she has helped people change, grow, and reclaim the lives that they were born to live. She's a clinical psychologist by training and a dreamer by design, and built a thriving private practice and served those who serve, specializing in post-traumatic stress with warriors and combat veterans as a Department of Defense contractor. In her work with leaders, she discovered another invisible wound, leadership injury, with the stress, the doubt, and the emotional wear that erodes confidence and identity from the inside out. And April has since become a leading voice in healing those hidden fractures so leaders can rise again, stronger, wiser, and more whole. But April's story is also one of daring reinvention, constantly. And even now, we've been chatting about how she reinvents herself in a number of situations. After earning degrees, as you said, Scott, from Texas A&M University and the University of Kansas, completing her VA internship and postdoc, she achieved her lifelong dream of becoming a psychologist. She suddenly realized that the biggest dream she had for her life was too small. I love that. So she stepped out of the office and into the unknown, taking a 2-year sabbatical to attend ministry school. This leap cracked the door wide open to a life of expansive possibility, dancing tango in Argentina. I think we got to see this one. Marathon running, which makes her my favorite person as a marathon runner myself, and a 40-day pilgrimage through Europe's castles and cathedrals. So you can see we're actually dealing with an interesting individual here today. Today, she is the Director of Leadership Excellence for the Exponential Mindset Group, a speaker and a consultant who equips leaders and organizations to break through fear, dismantle limiting beliefs, and build cultures where people and performance thrive. She's also founded the P31 Spiritual Fitness Challenge, empowering women to pursue bold dreams with courage and joy. So April teaches what she lives, dream big, break through fear, and live the story you want to tell. Her passion is helping others discover that the life they long for is not only possible, it's waiting. And I'm really excited about waiting for what you have to say today. I was thinking about faith, and as you know, I have a passion for acronyms. And in my conversations with you, you really have brought alive faith as an acronym of creating freedom, attitude, integrity, trust, hope, and healing. So, April, welcome today. I thought we could start off by just sharing your journey, your mission, your dreams, how it evolved, how you've grown, and how you see your dream moving forward. So, over to you.
Thank you, Barry. What an introduction. I appreciate it so much. And I'm happy to share my story today, with this being the power of our story. I feel like that's kind of the vehicle to be able to share with you today, is to just start with my story. But I want to do that through the lens of recognizing that everybody who's coming to this call has their own story. So many of us, in one respect or another, have been through transition and, finding identity, finding purpose in new ways. And so I think as I share my journey, I want to do that through the lens of kind of maybe dropping some little nuggets of like, hey, this is how I found mine. And maybe there's some breadcrumbs here that will help others who are searching, and give some handles for that. And I think the first one of those is recognizing that so much of who we're created to be is evident in childhood. Go back to the beginning, and really, as we grow up, we're becoming more of who we already are. And so I see that if I go back to the seeds, if I look at who I was when I was 8 years old, I wrote my first psychology paper at 8. And then I was also asked to write a biography on my favorite person. And I picked Jesus because I couldn't think of anybody better to write a biography on. So those were my first two papers that I wrote in third grade. And I also was elected class president that year under the name Diane Hart. I used a pseudonym, and the fact that I chose Hart, right? And was elected to a position of leadership. I had no idea then, the role that leadership would come to play in my life. And I also at that time I wrote, directed, produced, and starred in a small production that my third grade teacher let me put on with students from the class. And this woman, she was so generous. She allowed me to take other students out of class so that we could rehearse, and then set aside time in the middle of the school day for the rest of the class to come and see this play that we put on. And so part of that is also like, if you have people who believe in you, it fuels that fire. And so I see now still creative communication and story and all of those things were like woven into who I was already at 8 years old. And and so fast forward, I had an interest in psychology, obviously from a very young age. And when I was getting ready to go to A&M, I was trying to figure out like what's my major going to be. And I did it old school. I had a this is back when they had paper catalogs, right? And it was about this thick. I was like, well, I guess I should just read through it and see which classes I want to take. And so I did. I just read the whole thing cover to cover. I circled all of the classes that looked fun, and most of them were in psychology. So I decided to become a psychology major. And even how I got to A&M, I think is a story worth telling, because I think that was one of those decision points that I faced. I faced my first kind of major life decision. Where am I going to go to school at 16? And somehow I had the sense that I needed to ask God where I should go to school, right? I was really fortunate. I was raised in a Christian home. I don't remember a time in my life when I didn't know God. And so I began seeking God for direction, and I set aside, I think it was the summer that I was 16, I set aside a 40-day period to intentionally pray and ask God to show me where to go. And my mom, kind of went with me, and we did the school tour things. And so we did some up north. I was living in Chicago. I'm native Texan, but had gone to Chicago, northwest suburbs, and gone to high school up there. So I was looking at some schools up north, but then there was a part of me that really wanted to go back to Texas. And so we kind of toured different schools. And as soon as I got to College Station, I hadn't even been to the campus. And I knew in my knower, this is where I'm supposed to be. And so I think there are those times where you don't know it by your brain, but you know it in your knower. There's just something that clicks. And you're like, this is where I'm supposed to be. It didn't hurt. The next day I went on the campus tour and there was this guy who looked like Tom Cruise and I was sold and like, yes, count me in. Um, Little did I know then that decision that I made when I was 16 of like, this is the direction I want to go would land me here with you guys, right? I wasn't going necessarily because I had this dream of working with veterans or any such thing, but I now look back and I see, oh, that's how God introduced me to military culture. I had never had, there was nobody in my family, immediate family who had served, and I really hadn't had much exposure to it. But you go to A&M and like you're stepping over guys who are doing push-ups in the hallway. And I remember, coming out of class and there are guys with guns over their heads running around campus. And for me, I just felt really safe. I was like, wow, if something goes down, somebody's going to take care of it. So I also got immersed there in military tradition, honor. And there are things at A&M, you don't walk on the grass at the Memorial Student Center because it's a living memorial to those who have given their lives in the service of our country. And every month there is a special silver taps ceremony to honor the Aggies who have died. And they turn out the lights across campus. There's a 21 gun salute. I mean, it's the whole nine. And so that being just baked into my experience and being saturated in an environment that honored warriors, that honored military culture and tradition was preparing me for something that I had no idea how it was going to factor into the larger life story. And so I think that's one of the things of like, if you just keep following the breadcrumbs and you keep pulling the thread, you end up where you're supposed to be, even if you have no idea at the beginning how it's all going to come together. Fast forward, I ended up going to KU, as you know, and I went there. I was interested in depression research. And so I ended up doing my master's thesis on how meaning in life is a protective factor against depression. And I ended up studying under Rick Snyder, who was the founder of the Hope Lab. That ended up being really fortuitous since now a large part of what I talk about is hope and that belief that the future will be better than the present. And we have the power to make it so. I had no idea how much that was going to factor in down the road. And the other thing that was really important about my time at KU was I ended up doing my dissertation on intercessory prayer, right? So praying for other people. And the idea came to me in a dream and I decided to go for it. and and I figured the worst that would happen was people were being prayed for, and I see now God was weaving things together. Even how I got to grad school. I remember I'd been at another decision point when I had graduated from A&M. I was in college and I was even asking like, hey, should I go down this psychology road? Should I go to graduate school? And I remember I was reading a book called Experiencing God, and I didn't finish the book because I started experiencing God. And God began to speak to me. And again, I had been asking, like, hey, is this the direction I'm supposed to go? And he directed me to a scripture that was Isaiah 61. And it was one of those moments where words just kind of leap off the page. And it talks about the Spirit of the Lord is on me to preach good news to the poor and to bind up the brokenhearted. It was like that phrase, binding up the brokenhearted. It's like the whole thing, freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners. The whole thing is like a perfect job description for a psychologist, and I knew like that was my mission that God was giving me was that. And alongside that, it was really interesting because he distinguished between my mission and my purpose. And with my purpose, he said, think big, be intimate with God. And I was like, okay. And at first, I kind of thought that was really just about me, having a close, friendship and intimacy with God. But I've come to find out that part of that, the intersection of that mission and that purpose is that part of how I bind up the brokenhearted and part of how I set the captives free is I help people find that closer relationship with God, find their own friendship and their own intimacy with Him. And so fast forward, I was, leaning into that at KU. I was doing the work around intercessory prayer. And then I got to the end of my time in grad school and I really just needed a job. I was needing, there was kind of the schedule of like, well, it's you finished classes and the things that I was teaching, I had finished up my teaching assignments and most of my clinical work, and yet my dissertation was still running, and I needed to do something before I could start internship. And I got a random email, maybe not so random, from the VA in Leavenworth, Kansas. So, yes, I have done time in Leavenworth. And they were looking for somebody to do testing, neuropsych testing. And I was like, that would look great on my internship application. I don't know how to do it, but it would look great on my internship application. And so I applied at the VA. I only knew how to do one test, right? So for those of you who are like, hey, I'm not qualified, but I'm going to go for it, doors open, right? When it's ordained, it doors open. They hired me only knowing how to do one thing. They trained me on the job for everything else. And that was really where I started working with veterans for the first time. And the cool part was I was working with World War II veterans. I was sitting across from guys that like I had seen things on a documentary, and then I go to work and I'm with a guy who was there, and that was just mind blowing. And I loved it so much. I fell in love with the veteran population, and I said, hey, this is where I want to do my internship. I ended up staying for my postdoc. And so I think, Barry, one of the things you and I talked about was kind of this parallel of, I think we both started working with World War II veterans, and then I kind of cut my teeth on Vietnam veterans. And then toward the end of my internship and into my postdoc, I was starting to see guys coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And I was like, holy smokes, like this is my generation. And I was like, and I don't want to see these folks suffer for the next 40 years like the Vietnam era guys who had before them. And I was like, so what do I do with that? And I had one of those dreams in my heart that someday, right? I mean, I have written my first psychology paper at 8. So I'd been thinking about it for a while. And even as a teenager, I thought, well, maybe someday I would have a private practice, right? But once I got into the VA system, I was very fortunate to work at a fantastic VA where veterans were people and not numbers. We had a staff who really, really genuinely cared. They were there for more than a paycheck. But then I needed to relocate to Texas. And I thought, well, I love working at the VA. It's not like they don't need help in mental health. Of course, there'll be a job open. Nope. Zero openings in the Dallas Fort Worth area at the time I was moving. And so I started praying again and asking about private practice. And it was like that someday, maybe. Today is someday. And so I launched out and hung out my shingle. I said, okay, I'm going to start a private practice. And I walked through that entire process again, prayerfully with God. And I just asked God, okay, how do I set up my practice? How do I do this? By the way, in grad school, they teach you how to do the clinical stuff. They don't teach you how to build a business. And I think that's one of the things a lot of veterans coming out and they're like, hey, I want to start, I think I want to become an entrepreneur. Like, a certain set of skills, but then it's like, okay, do I know how to run a business? And thankfully, God guided me through that. And I really still wanted to work with veterans, but I didn't know if there would be a market to do it in the private sector. I'm like, why would they come and pay me if they could go to the VA for free? Turns out there was a market for it. And there were some things that I was able to offer, right? It was a comfortable private setting, not a hospital kind of setting. And when I first started, I was offering evening and weekend hours, so that made it more convenient. And then again, just by providence, there was some grant funding. So they didn't even have to foot the bill. Somebody else was willing to pay so that they could be seen. And so I did that private practice for 10 years and had veterans as a specialty in my practice. I saw people from other walks of life as well. And some of that work was combat trauma. And I used a lot of cognitive processing therapy. And the essence of that is really looking at what you believe about what's happened, right? What's the story that you're telling yourself? And where do you need to maybe shift that narrative? And so doing that work day in, day out, year after year with folks was really impactful, I think, in terms of the whole of my work. And for me, it was really integrated because as a Christian, I know that if you know the truth will set you free, right? And so it was like, oh, if I'm believing a false narrative about something that's happened to me, then okay, it makes sense that that's jacking me up. And if I can come to the truth of that, if I can come to a more hopeful and helpful perspective, then there's going to be freedom that opens up with that. And I discovered not only with my veteran clients, but I think across the board, I would say there were kind of three main things that people came to me for. I saw anxiety, right? Whether that was post-traumatic stress, panic, general anxiety, whatever it might be, but it was some form of fear. And and the folks who had anxiety, what they were looking for was peace. I worked with folks who had depression, and what they were looking for was joy. And the other big category was relationship stuff, right? Either people who are alone and lonely and wish they weren't, or people who are in relationships and they wish they weren't in those relationships, or that they really wish those relationships could be redeemed and reconciled and be healthy again. And I realized so these folks were looking for love. And I'm like, love, joy, and peace. All of those are spiritual things. Those are all fruit of the spirit. And so for me, it was very integrated. And I think that was surprising to a lot of people because there's so many psychologists. The training tends to be very, in your head, and there's a branch of science that kind of is at odds with spirituality. But for me, it was always integrated, that these two things are supporting one another. And I was really fortunate. I loved what I was doing. I was having a blast. I loved working with veterans in that context. And part of the reason for that is that warriors know how to do hard things. And so these were folks who were willing to go there and face the pain, face the trauma, and and stick with it so that they could overcome. And I got to watch people's lives being transformed. And I could see somebody come in and they might have a textbook case of post-traumatic stress. And 6 months to a year later, they would leave and they wouldn't even meet criteria anymore. And that was amazing to me to watch people heal, to watch people get free. And sometimes it was that long process that we walked through together. And then there were times where it was like it happened in a moment. It was like you could have one session and something would shift, and this whole time I'm asking God about the person in front of me and his perspective for the heart that he's entrusted to me and what he wants to say to that person. And so there would be times where he would say something and it would change everything. It was like, wow, this person has been carrying something for years. And today was the day we had a conversation and that completely shifted everything and shifted now the trajectory of their life. And so that was incredibly rewarding work. And yet I realized I was, at this point I had gotten to private practice. I was rocking and rolling. I was maybe 35 and I realized, okay, I've achieved the highest dream that I have for my life. And it was like this moment of panic of like, uh-oh, what now? Do I just sit in this little room for the next 30 years? Like the walls were sort of closing in. And I had one of my clients who said to me, April, what you do is incredible. And it's so valuable. You can't just help one person an hour. And that hit home. And so it was a period of years. It wasn't, I say sometimes revelation hits you, it's like a light switch, and a light bulb comes on. Other times, and this was the case for me, so often that revelation, it comes as a series of candles, and you're in a dark room and you can't see, but then a little light comes on, and then another, and then another. And you might not even know where you cross that threshold, but at some point, it becomes clear and like, okay, now I can see. And so I knew a change was coming and I started to do some coaching, not just counseling, and I played with some different things. And then I think part of it, there was a Bethel music concert that I went to. And this, I had been reading books from these different folks and I found out they were all from the same place. And I went to this concert and somebody told me about this school of ministry and they were like, yeah, it's like 9 months. And if you ever get a chance to do it, you totally should because it'll change your life. I was like, okay, well, that sounds cool. I'm doing well here in Texas. I have a life I love. I have essentially a ministry to the most amazing group of people on the planet, warriors that I love. So I'm not really looking to blow that up anytime soon. But if at some point God should call me to ministry school, it went in the someday maybe box. Fast forward a couple years, and again, today is someday. And it became time for me to leave my practice and make that leap. In I had gone skydiving with a friend at a place that their slogan was shut up and jump. I have good friends who push me out of my comfort zone and out of a plane if necessary, right? And that became like this. I realized one of the questions I constantly asked myself, if this were a dream, what would it mean? And I knew like this metaphor, this jump that I took with my friend was not just about skydiving. And I realized, oh, this is a leap I need to make in my life. And so I felt like God was calling me to go to ministry school. And so I did. I laid everything down. I closed my practice and I went to California because I wanted to passionately pursue the presence of God. And I was a little bit surprised that he asked me to go because when you have a PhD and you've done all of the school for all of your life, you're kind of thinking you're done with school. And he said to me, that was for your head and this is for your heart. So I went to ministry school and the first year is really a lot of personal development and then there was there was more of the leadership side of things that emerged after that. And in this, I think part of what happened for me was fear broke off of my life. And I started recognizing my yes to God is what opens doors for the amazing things to happen. And I started to see it, it was interesting because God had spoken a word to me before. He said to me, "You are fearless." And when he said it, I was kind of freaked out, which is not the reaction you would expect from somebody who's fearless, right? I was kind of like Gideon in the wine press, right? When God shows up and says, "Hey, you mighty man of valor," and he's like, "Who, me?" But I was like, "Huh, okay, this is who God says I am." And so I felt almost like a lion cub who's got to grow into their paws, you know? And I think maybe I'm still growing into them. But I started on that journey. Saying yes to ministry school was a bold move. But that was part of this era that then kicked off this amazing travel around the world, going to Argentina. That was part of how God walked me through the grief of the goodbye of everything that I had known and everything that I had built, and I think that's one of the reasons working with warriors in transition now, I understand what it's like to say I lived the dream. I did everything I had spent my whole life training for, and I loved it. But now it's time to do something new. And who am I? What is my purpose? What is my identity? I remember standing in a department store and having a moment of crisis because I needed to buy clothes for school and I didn't know what that was. I was like, I'm used to dressing like a psychologist. I show up in a dress and heels, but now I'm going to be a student. Is that like yoga pants and a sweatshirt? Like, what am I supposed to wear? I don't know. And so that whole idea, my uniform that I was taking off was a little bit different from veterans or first responders, but I have that sense of like, oh, who am I now and what am I about? And yet I'm glad I forged ahead in the middle of that uncertainty. And one of the things my mother taught me is serenity doesn't depend on certainty. And so if you can go forward without knowing, you can have peace that passes understanding, even if you don't know all of the things yet. And for me, I think through that saying, okay, I know that God is good. I know that his plans for me are good. And I know that everything is going to work out for my good. That's all I need to know. And through that, I didn't have all of the puzzle pieces. I didn't know what was coming next, right? I stayed at ministry school. I thought then I would be there forever. I was like, oh, I have this amazing community. We talk so much about tribe. I had found a group of people who were as crazy passionate about God as I am. And I was like, this is my jam. These are my people. And then COVID, right? And we couldn't meet. And of course, we stayed connected, but I was like, oh, I don't know that I'm going to get to stay in this community long term. I was happy. I had my burn the ships moment. I'm like, I found my new place. And then things changed. And God ended up calling me. Again, he spoke to me through a dream, through an encounter in the night, and told me to move back to Texas. And my family at the time, they were taking care of my dad's parents. And so I ended up moving to Mineola, Texas, way out in East Texas. And I went from being in a school in a church of 10,000 people to living in a town of 5,000 people. So that was a pretty big culture shock to have that. And yet, I now see once again, I'm like, oh, I see what you did there. And there's so many moments like that I've had with God. During that season, I ended up having some great conversations with my father about leadership. He's been in the corporate world, was a part of a Fortune 100 environment for 30 years. And so we started talking about leadership, and I'm like, the things that he's talking about that happen, And the things that I've seen happen with the vets that I've worked with, that trauma, right? The moral injury. And I started to come to understand there was this thing called leadership injury. And I know we have some folks on the call who have experienced that organizational betrayal, or maybe it's from a particular leader. Obviously, leaders also get hurt. I had a pastor tell me once the sheep bite. And so sometimes it goes both ways. And so I started digging into that and understanding how can I take what I learned before about how the human heart heals and then apply it to this new area of leadership injury. And so I began to dig into that. And then the other thing that I started getting really interested in was like, how do I take what I've learned? Because I've learned how to live my dreams. I've learned how to break through fear. I've learned how visualization and declaration and prayer and this closeness with God and following his guidance can open up these doors to do the impossible. And so how do I bring that to people? And so I started developing curriculum and courses and things like that, and working with people in a coaching context, either one-on-one or in groups, and developed a lot of different resources to be able to help people grow closer to God and go after their dreams. And I think the interesting thing, I think when you and I talked, Barry, I told you I used to have a normal life. And when I took that leap and I said yes to God and let's just go for it, I started an adventure, and I'm still on that adventure. Nowadays I speak and I talk a lot about hope. I talk about leadership injury. I talk about hearing God. I have a talk called Heavenly Chocolate that's fun for that. And I work with people in a coaching context. I do some spiritual advising, but my aim is always to help people find that freedom and that breakthrough so that they can live the story they want to tell. So I'll turn it back over to you, Barry. And if you have questions or thoughts, I'd love to hear them.
I'd just like to explore a little bit more. I mean, I think, can you talk to, because we talked briefly about that experience of Argentinian dance and
Mm.
running. Can you talk to that? Because you have all the, first of all, when you do talk, April, it's you don't talk, you sing. It's almost, I would describe it as a psalm. You just want to keep listening, and every part of your body just tingles and your heart just opens. You have, and I'll get to that because I think there is something that we need to all think about what we embody in the healing process. But
Mm.
can you talk to the dance and
I
and
I
the
will.
marathon running?
I will. And so you're keying in on something that for me has become systemic throughout my life. I've talked about friendship with God. I've talked about intimacy with God. I also have tango with God, and I have running with God. And so the take home here, there's nothing that I don't do. There's nothing that I do that I don't do with God. And for me, tango was something that I learned, and it became a language for my relationship with God. And it was the place that I learned trust and that I learned the art of followership. And I came to I learned it by dancing literal tango, right? But then I started to see how many parallels there were between dancing with a partner and this dance that I have with God where he's leading me and I'm following. And I think there's not a lot out there. I've done a Google search, leadership. I think there were 800 million hits on leadership and just over a million on followership, right? So there are 800 more times, like times more resources on leadership, and nobody talks about followership. But there's something about being in that place of trust. And I know surrender is kind of a dirty word in warrior circles. I call it yielding, right? Where I yield myself to my partner and I'm willing to allow myself to be led. And in that space, it becomes a paradigm where I understand what it means to walk by faith and not by sight, right? If I'm on the dance floor, my eyes are closed and I'm moving backwards, probably in heels. And so, like, I am clearly not calling the shots here, right? I am not in charge of the choreography. And I've learned like there's so much freedom in releasing that control and knowing that I don't have to plan everything. And the reason I think it's Argentine tango for me is that dance, it's about connection more than it's about the steps. And it's so much more about the journey than the destination, right? Nobody's on the dance floor saying, okay, well, if we play our cards just right, then when the music ends, we'll be by the drink table. Like nobody does that. Nobody cares about the destination. or where you end up on the floor. It's really about that journey. It's about the connection. In Argentine tango, you can pause in the middle of the song and just hold your partner. And that's tango. And from a follower's perspective, I don't know if he's doing that because he just wants to have this wonderful romantic moment where we're just lost in the music together, or if he actually sees there's a bottleneck of traffic and he's got to wait for some other couples to move, and it doesn't matter to me. And so the same thing has happened when I'm waiting on God. I come in this place where I'm connected with him, and he pauses, and sometimes that's just because he wants to be with me, and sometimes it's like, hey, I'm arranging some stuff for you downstream, but I gotta move a few other things out of the way before we can move forward. But it's that connection of I'm doing everything by feel. It's a conversation without words. And I wait for the movement of his heart, right? In tango, the man leads with presence, right? You're close enough to feel the other person's heartbeat. And the way he moves, he's not moving you with his arms. It's not about his feet. It's when he moves forward, he moves with his heart. And so with God, when I feel his heart move, I take a step, right? And we move in sync together. And so I've had that whole framework to say, okay, everything that I do in tango can now be lessons for life. I've learned it's all about the connection. And if I'll focus on the embrace, right? Tango is a walking hug. And so if I'll focus on the connection, the steps will take care of themselves. And the same is true with God. If I'll focus on my connection with him, then the steps will take care of themselves. With running, it's a similar kind of thing, right? The Lord has shown me so many things when I go out on running. And by the way, the fact that I run is a miracle already. So I was born with life-threatening asthma. I've had 4 foot surgeries. I was diagnosed with a malformed heart valve and a heart murmur. So I never thought I would run a mile, much less marathons, right? And now I've run 15. And I'm praying my way across the USA by running marathons in all 50 states. And again, you don't have to know the end from the beginning. If you just follow God, he'll get you where you're supposed to go. My first marathon was the Marine Corps marathon. And I thought I thought a marathon would be a one and done, check the box, right? And I was like, well, if I'm only going to do one, then it's got to be Marine Corps, right? This running tour of DC. And I was like, and there'll probably be somebody who can carry me in my car if I can't move after that. And God gave me the idea to dedicate every mile to praying for a different veteran. And so I had a bracelet made, and so I could keep track of who each mile was dedicated. And that was what got me through the race, right? I was praying for them and giving thanks, and just remembering who they were to me and what they had meant in my life, and praying a blessing over them. And when I got to the end, like I realized that was the heartbeat of the race for me. It wasn't so much about the running as it was what God was doing while I was running, and running was just the vehicle. But he's taught me so many different things, and the parallels of giving me every place I set my foot, and sometimes he'll speak to me while I'm on the run of things that I see, in the trees or on the road or whatever the case might be. But it's like that becomes my time with him. And I think it was one of those things he had to teach me in terms of like the evolution, if I can go here. Because I think one of the things that's really important is to understand the evolution of a relationship with God. I remember, I started off, I never had a place where I didn't know God, but I think I did have a place where I thought prayer was talking to God, and I didn't yet understand that it was a dialogue. I didn't understand yet that it was a two-way conversation. And I knew how to seek him. He spoke to me in ways that I could understand even before I started hearing his voice, right? And then I had gone through a dark season when I was at A&M, and I was coming out of that. And it was kind of in that era where I was seeking him about grad school and all of that. And I remember Oprah had this thing where she was doing a campaign. She's like, hey, if you'll spend an hour a day with us, we'll change your life. And God did speak to me, and he said, April, I'm better than Oprah. If you'll give me 30 minutes a day, I can do it in half the time. I'll change your life. And so that started for me kind of this idea of quiet time, right? When I had first started off, I would have like 5 minutes in the morning and 5 minutes in the afternoon, in the evening or something like that. But I got where I was able to figure out how to spend 30 minutes a day with God. Fast forward, I continued that practice as I was running, right? And And yet, when I ran my first marathon, I know this will shock you if anybody has run a marathon or knows someone who has. When you run your first marathon, it is your whole life, right? You tell everybody about it. You're excited. You're training. You're reading everything. I was reading everything I could. It was like work was what I did. I went to see veterans in between. That was my recovery between runs, right? It was a great thing to do. And what I didn't realize until after the fact was running had actually become my God. Right now, I wouldn't have said that to you, but if I use Bob Hamp's definition, I love this. He says, whatever organizes your life is your God. And so, even though I was still spending that 30 minutes a day with God, if I was trying to make plans for the weekend, it wasn't necessarily, well, let me ask God. It was, let me check my schedule and see how many miles I got to run. Right. And that was the thing that was organizing my life. And God, in his mercy, reordered that for me, right? 6 days after I finished the Marine Corps Marathon, I was wearing those little five finger shoes and I stepped on an acorn and sprained my foot. And it took me out of running. I thought it would be 6 weeks. It turned out to be 6 months. And I realized during that time it was, and I couldn't make sense of it. I was like, God, I know you can heal my foot. Like, what is going on? But I realized he wanted to do so much more than just heal my foot. And if I had gotten right back on the road, I would have missed the grander invitation that he had for me. And it was during that season that he said to me, he said, so April, you've been really good about doing your 30 minutes a day of quiet time, but that's kind of like 5K level. So you're training your spirit at 5K and you're training your body at 26.2 at marathon level. What if you were to train your spirit like you train your body, right? If you're training your body an hour to 2 hours a day, hour and a half, 2 hours a day, what if you trained your spirit at the same level? Notice he never said, don't train your body. He never said to take that away. But that was where this idea of running with God was born because I was like, oh, how do I do this with him? How do I make this become something that's integrated? And so now he gives me prayer themes. Sometimes it's a scripture, sometimes it's somebody to pray for. But I think the main idea, like, you don't have to be a runner, you don't have to be a tango dancer, but whatever you are, can you find a way to invite God into it? You know, if it's gardening, if it's cooking. Last night I was in the kitchen and I was making something and I was making it for someone and God began to drop ideas, prayers for the person that I was making it for based on the ingredients. You know? And so whatever we're doing to have that sense of connection with God, to have a sense of his presence, to have a sense of that two-way communication, it's that intimacy with God, no matter what the activity is, that gives us that sense of never being alone and never being without guidance or direction. So I'll kick it
You
back to
know,
you.
I mean, before we kick it off to everyone, April, really, I mean, God, you need to write a book. Um, the pearls of wisdom and the phrases, they encapsulate so much. And you know what came to me was that if we strip away everything, what you talked about was brokenheartedness. And the one thing I realized when I began working, it took a while when I was working with the veterans and the World War II boys and then the Vietnam boys, and then from there, and including myself, I became aware that we all sit together in this room with our broken hearts. Now, when I see psychologists proudly state we use evidence-based approaches, and what they sit is with their evidence-based approaches. It's almost like they've trained their minds, but what about training their spirits to catch up with the mind? And I think the thing I've learned more and more, and especially in listening to you, is that unless we sit with love in our hearts, something is not going to happen.
Correct.
And as I've sat and listened to people with faith, I realized that when a veteran or a first responder faces somebody with faith, there is a whole lot of stuff that doesn't have to get worked through because there's a sense of being seen and hearts connecting. And if we think about it, you know, Winnicott, who was an amazing man, he talked about the child looks into its mother's eyes, and if he doesn't see himself or herself, then something doesn't happen. And that act of being seeing is not a cognitive act, it's an act of love. And I wonder why, when we know the very beginnings of forming who we are, why we keep focusing on modalities rather than training in presence and the
Mm,
heart. So I think I want to thank you for really highlighting that. I mean, you live it. I don't think I've ever spoken to anyone who dances with God so intimately in such an animated way that can move you and just sort of leave you sitting with laughter. It's
mm,
you dance with God, you run with God. It's beautiful. So on that note, I'm going to hold it open to anybody that does have a question. Scott, if you want to drive that one, it would be
Sure.
great.
Yeah, well, I'll start. That was wonderful. First of
mm,
all, thank you so much. I love the fact that you're so bold with your experiences and with your fact that you love God and you boldly tell your story in that regard. That means a lot. And uh, it's interesting. Sometimes folks that might not, you know, be there yet, maybe they're wondering,
mhm,
and maybe they're afraid, or maybe they're aggravated. Maybe they feel. Maybe that's where they feel they've been betrayed. Right? There's
mhm,
all kinds of things that go into to faith and your connection with God. And you talked about, being uncomfortable, right? How many things do we do in life that are uncomfortable, but they're actually good for us, right? Going to the gym if you haven't been, or if you've hurt yourself, you sprain your ankle, you're out for 6 months.
mhm,
What does it take to get back into shape? It takes discipline, it takes time, but it also takes faith that you're going to get better, right?
mhm,
That these things I'm doing are going to make me better. And once you realize that that's what God is all about, Jesus is right there at the door. You know, if you knock, if you reach out, the door is going to open, and then you trust and you
mhm,
walk through that door, and it's amazing what happens. I'm in my life. I'm not going to talk about it, but I'm just very thankful that I walked through that door. It's made all the difference in my life. There's no doubt about that. And you know, we go through tough times still, right? Because we live in a broken world.
mhm,
But we know that there's something a little bit different. Uh, when you found Christ and you like you talk to, uh, that becomes what you do, right? You start to see things differently. You start to communicate differently. You start to think differently. And that Barry talked to, your heart opens, right? And then that that thing, that love thing, is just incredible because you start loving people that you might not have had a whole lot of regard for because you see them differently, right? It's amazing the changes. But so I guess what I want to ask you is uh, you talk to how meaning is important. And I think that leads to like the sense of purpose. Who am I? What do I do? So many veterans and first responders, when we go from what we did, whether it was a few years or 30, a lifetime of
mhm,
being this person that wore a uniform that, A through Z,
mhm,
you had a routine, a battle rhythm, so to speak, and that's what you did. That's who you were. And then in one day you're gone, from service. And then you had to figure out, what am I going to do now? Uh, and a lot of people can be very successful getting a job, you know, and then they're going along, and then something's just not right, and they don't really understand. Well, okay, something's missing. I've got this hole, It's like they say that God-sized hole in my heart,
mhm,
and there's a good chance that it could be that, right? The faith part, but then the other part is wow, I don't know who I am anymore. I've just jumped straight from being this guy to being that guy, and they're
mhm.
not the same person, and I don't know where I am. And you can feel lost with that. What can you tell us from your experience in working with the folks you work with? What are some things that you found are important for folks to understand that are going through that stress and the uncertainty?
Absolutely. I think so. One thing I'll say is it is incredibly impactful to examine your ethos. What is the code that you're going to live by? And I think, especially in a lot of, warrior spaces, every branch of service, different things. There's a creed that's given to you. And yet, whether or not that's the totality of who you choose to be after service, it's important to examine that. And just if anybody has like, hey, I want to learn how to develop this, I have an exercise that kind of walks you through developing that if it's something of interest. So people can reach out to me if they want to do that. But I think that's one of the things that was really helpful for me to say, who am I? And what am I here for, to crystallize that in terms of like, just the beliefs and the statements and things like that, even to be able to face discomfort, right? If part of my ethos is pain is not my master and discomfort doesn't make my decisions. Well, if that's something that I know that I live by, then now when I'm in that situation, I know what to do because I know who I am and I know how I want to live. And it's, James Clear talks about every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. And so getting clear about what is your vision of who you want to be, who you're created to be, and being able to put pen to paper crystallizes it, I think, in a way that's really, really important and impactful for folks. I think there's also an element of being able to explore the different facets of who you are. I have a psychologist friend who is brilliant, and she does work with restoring self cohesion. Her name's Dr. Shannon Crawford, and she works with parts of self, and as I've done that, I've started to recognize I have lots of different parts of my personality. And so I have a warrior spirit. I have, this part of me that is an intercessor and a bride, and I have a dancer, and I have an adventurer and a dreamer and a teacher and entrepreneur, like all of these different facets of who I am. And so then as I'm beginning to enter into, okay, do I want to take on this project? Do I want to say yes to this opportunity? If it's a job or whatever the case may be, then I begin looking at how is that an expression of who I am, of those parts of my personality. By the way, if I'm having ambivalence about something, I, you know, Dr. Crawford talks about having an internal board meeting, right? So sometimes you got to get everybody on the committee in one space and say, okay, well, so let's take a vote. And different parts of you may say, hey, I want to do this, and then another part of you is like, I don't know that I want to because this part of me thinks otherwise, right? So when we have those mixed feelings or those places where it's an internal tug of war, to be able to peel back those layers and say, hey, what's going on in there and how is this aligned? I think is impactful. And then there's also, I think, the faith piece of being able to ask God, who am I and what am I here for? And to be able to be in a space where the different ways that he speaks. Sometimes it'll be as clear as it was, for me with the scripture of like, okay, here's your thing. Okay, well, that is clearly a confirmation because you just gave me a job description for a psychologist. Okay. Sometimes it's just the knowing in your knower, like I had when I rolled into College Station, and that was how he spoke, was through peace. Sometimes it's through a dream, but being able to ask those questions, being able to look at, well, who was I when I was 8 years old? All of those different puzzle pieces are things that you put together. And I think one of the ways when we're coming to those points of decision, look at which way the arrows are pointing. If you could map them out, okay, well, this arrow seems to be pointing this way, this arrow seems to be pointing this way. The more that you get that, you start to get convergence, and clarity and confidence comes from that convergence.
Absolutely. And I really like when you say, what is, I'm trying to remember exactly how you say it, when you're knower. Is that what you're,
And
that
you
phrase?
know
I
her.
like that.
Hmm.
I like
Hmm.
that. I need to write that down so I don't forget it.
Yes, yes. And I think the thing that I would advise people to do, pay attention to where you experience things in your body. Right? If I've got the little hamster in my head, that's probably up here. If I know in my knower, it's probably in my gut, right? We talk about getting a gut feeling, a gut instinct. So the seat of our intuition, the place where we connect with our spirit, is often the core of our being. It may not be in your head. That's where there's usually a lot of chatter, right? It's not to say that God can't speak through your thoughts. He does. But when you know in your knower, you may feel it in a different place in your body. And so being able to tell where is this intel coming from can help you sort out like, okay, is that something I need to pay attention to?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And the fact that you spoke to both lines, right? and it intersected with God.
Mhm.
That resonates. Um, Let me think. I did have something else. I'm a little out of my element because I'm not where I usually am when I'm doing this.
Sure.
Can you guys hear that kind of a loud noise in the background? I think it's the air system that's come on. So good, that's not interfering. But yeah, so I tell you what, let's do this. I see Sarah has her hand up, so we're gonna go to Sarah real quick. Sarah, what do you got for us?
All right. Trying to gather my thoughts. Oh, April, you are exciting. I mean, the spirit in you is beautiful. It's powerful. It's exciting. You articulate things so beautifully that are not kind of everywhere out there.
Mm.
And there's so much that you share that resonates so deeply with me that I don't have the words for.
Aw.
So this has just been very exciting. I'm so happy to be connected with you. So loved our talk previously too. But there's so many things that hit me, so I have to just choose one or else it'll be too long. Um, I used to play in a quartet in my other life, my younger life. I was a freelance violinist. I come from classical musician family, and I had the honor and the exciting privilege to be able to play in the Monterey String Quartet at one point, where the lead violinist allowed me to learn viola on the job because the violist left and they already had a second violinist. And we would play for these great parties in Carmel and Monterey. And we used to play the Argentina tangos all the time. And this lead violinist was phenomenal. He was so good. He wrote the music, arranged it for the quartet. And all we had to do, like our job, was just to, follow just every nuance. And doing that, there was such a collaboration. The music was just beautiful. I cannot tell you what a pleasure it was to play in that group. And so when you're sharing about that, the thought came to me, and I've never really articulated this clearly, and I think it hugely has to do with this with veterans and first responders too. It's a way of getting out of your head and permission that wait a minute, this is actually a spiritual thing to follow that knower.
Mhm.
Even if your head is saying all these things that you should be doing this, this, this. Even in church, there can be a legalism where you should be doing this, 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 and you don't really have the freedom to actually really follow that personal spirit, that relationship with God. And so when you were sharing all this, around the time that I got connected with veterans was that time where somewhere in my subconscious I was saying, I'm not being free. I'm not living free right now to follow that spirit that is actually leading me to the things that are really on my heart. And that was such a huge shift. And I felt like there is already so many things in place just being a musician where you're really listening and you're feeling and you're really following the lead to make, beautiful music. So I hear what you're saying, and it's just so amazing having, mind, body, soul, spirit working together with the one that created us, having that freedom. And so, listen, sister, man, I love how God is using you. It's really wonderful, and I hope we can keep collaborating, or whatever. But I'm just so thrilled that Barry connected us and that you're on this platform and just a great source of inspiration. So thanks so much, April, for everything
Yes.
you shared.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and maybe we can talk on a deeper level because I think you're touching on something which is, you know, the expression of emotion. There's something very human about it, and then that also connects us to the spirit, and it gets us out of kind of our heads. It was interesting. My tango teacher used to say, "Concentrate, but don't think." And so it's about being present and creating space to feel and creating space for the things that so much of our culture is all about. It's the checklist, it's the go, 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 it's the performance, it's the grinding, as opposed to, I love how the message puts that invitation in Matthew, come to me all who are weary. And in the message it says, learn the unforced rhythms of grace. And that's what we're really talking about is an invitation not to legalism, but to be moved and to be led and to be able to enjoy the human experience. And I do think there's something in particular for the tango and perhaps the veteran community, anyone who's experienced grief or loss, it is part of the tango because the origin of the dance was people who had left their homelands, and it's the dance of immigrants. And so there's something about that grief and being able, Barry and I have talked about like the importance of tribe and you're sharing grief and you're sharing this human moment, and it doesn't require words. It's even us being present with one another in the place where we just sit. And when we do that, the spirit inside us connects with the other person. And so there's a spirit to spirit connection, there's a heart to heart connection. In the tango, there's a body to body connection. And that's so different than the mind to mind connection that we settle for. Yes, I love to have intellectual discussions and speak mind to mind, but if that's all it is, we fall short of the human experience and all that's available to us. So I love it.
Oh, that's very powerful. And Sarah, thank you for that as well. And for those that will see this, the recording of our interview, just so you know, Sarah Carell, she is the founder of the Power Story. She's been leading us now over 5 years. And it just dawned on me listening to you say what you said, Sarah, that that's why you have become the conductor, right? You've moved seats, and you understand music and how important it is that you have the right folks playing the right instruments and it all comes together the way it should. And so that's what she's been doing with us at the Power Story, and all the wonderful things that we're doing are they're founded in her heart. And God's really worked in a lot of ways, and that's why we're here today. So that's that. So let me go over to is that Ira? What you got?
Hey Doc, great to meet you. Happy to have connected with you later or earlier today and meeting later. I will say that as a veteran, it seems like you have a lot of street cred dealing with the vets. So awesome, awesome work that you're doing. I can't wait to talk to you and learn more. And one of the things you said in there was about the warrior ethos, right? Um, and unfortunately, part of having to abide by those warrior ethos in the service is sometimes you just have to embrace the misery
Mm-hmm.
of what's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to, we call it embracing the suck, pardon my French.
Yes. Yes.
Um, but do
I'm familiar.
you, yeah, I'm sure. Have you seen um, that being carried over into when they transition and they feel miserable and isolated, that they embrace that because that's just the way they're programmed to deal with war or to deal like I was never on the front lines, but I've worked, 16, 24-hour shifts where no fail missions, you either load the cargo and save lives or, you know, you don't save lives at all. So you just learn to embrace that and internalize it. Have you seen that be something that veterans come to realize, like, maybe I'm not a warrior anymore and I can actually let things go and let things happen? And, it's like in my personal life, it was always, well, I have to do this. Why? Well, because it has to be done before the next day begins. And I've started since, my own revelations in my transition of, eh, it's not tomorrow. It's not going to matter if it's done or not. It's, you know, the pile of laundry can stay on the floor,
Yeah.
and if I get to it tonight, great. If not, there's always
It'll
Thursday.
be there tomorrow.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So have you seen that be an issue with veterans as they transition?
I think it can work for you or against you
Mm,
depending on how you metabolize it. So if the mentality is I'm going to embrace the suck and it means I'm simply going to endure and tolerate something
mm,
that's making me miserable, but I'm not going to try to change it and I have no sense of purpose that I'm suffering for, this greater sense of meaning or some kind of cause, then I think that sort of slowly degrades. It can push you into this kind of hopeless, helpless sort of corner of like, well, this is just my life now and it just sucks and that's how it is and it's
Hmm.
never going to get better. If, on the other hand, you say, okay, I know I got some work to do. I know I have some inner work to do. I know there are some demons I got to face. There are some things that I need to tackle. There's some changes that I need to make. There are some disciplines in my life that I need to establish or let go of. Some habits I need to let
Hmm.
go of. And I'm going to embrace the suck and I'm going to lean into that discomfort because I know how to do that and I'm going to leverage that skill for a purpose to make things better. Then I think it can work for you in that context. And yet, I think the other piece of it is to balance it. I did the deliberate discomfort challenge several years ago, a 60-day challenge, and you can imagine embrace the suck was part of the part of the
Hmm.
program. And and yet God said something to me during that challenge. And he said, "So April, it's fine to embrace the suck, but you need to realize you weren't made for the suck. You
Hmm.
were created for heaven. You were created for Eden. You were created for joy and for pleasure. And so, what if you were to lean in to embracing pleasure, embracing joy, finding out how to cultivate joy as much as you are able to endure suffering?" And
Hmm.
so I think that's the other piece of it is to balance, especially when you get out and now, okay, my life is my own now. It hasn't been, and I wasn't making the rules, but now I do. So what do I want? How do I want to set the levers of pleasure and pain in my life? And how do I want to weave all that together with purpose and with the divine direction that I'm being given? I think the equation is more complex, perhaps, than we realize on the surface.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic because it does take a lot of courage to be vulnerable. And sometimes, I mean, Scott can attest he was a Marine. Sometimes it's easier to just pick up a rifle and charge than it is to be vulnerable.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. So I think a lot of veterans look at that as, if I'm vulnerable, think people will think I'm weak.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I love your answer on that. That's gonna be it's gonna if you tune in, you'll hear that.
Okay. Wonderful, wonderful. And we can extend the conversation on vulnerability as well, because I think there's recognizing even that there's a purpose in that, because you can get a certain level of connection from openness, right? If I tell you my story, you guys know something about me now, you probably feel more connected to me now than we did at the
Hmm.
beginning of the call, right? I chose in this setting, I haven't, something we're going to put on the internet. I haven't unpacked all of the deepest, darkest corners of my life for you. But
Hmm.
if I were to do that, right, in the place where I share something that involves risk, it's when we have vulnerability that is covered with honor, right? So
Hmm.
it's the seeing is the honor part of it, and the being seen is the vulnerability. And when those two meet, that's where connection happens. And I think, that part of, if, especially if you talk to veterans, like being in a vulnerable position on the battlefield, that's not a good thing, right? That means risk has been introduced. There's danger there. We're trying to eliminate that. And yet, if you think of it in terms of if I put myself at risk and somebody covered me, if somebody else came and had my six and they saved my bacon, what's the bond that's formed
Hmm.
when somebody covers you in the place of risk and they create safety where there was danger? There's a bond there that forms. And the same thing happens in relationship. We'll have one level of relationship if I'm open with you, and I probably want to test the waters to make sure you are going to honor my vulnerability before I go deep, right? So I can
Hmm.
do that at this openness level. But once that level of trust is established, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I think I can talk to Ira about something maybe on a deeper level. Then I take a risk. And if you meet me in that place and you see me and you honor what I've shared, then there's a bond that's going to deepen and that connection is going to get stronger. And that's how trust and connection are built over time is through vulnerability.
Yep. Street cred.
Yes. Yes. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That was fantastic. I can't wait to talk to you further on in January. It's gonna be great.
Yes, it will be. I'm so glad you're here today.
Yeah, me too.
Well, thank you, Ira. That was great and fantastic reply as well, April. Um, yeah, it's it's always amazing to me when I hear things like this unpack and we're in discussions and I think about the tenets of what Sarah has wanted to develop, nurture, and maintain, and what you just talked to. I think we've become pretty good at that. When we bring folks on in these conversations, and then the ones that we have weekly, where folks are coming back, and there's that level of trust that's built to where openness happens, people are seen, people are heard, and then we're able to get down to those levels that really hit pay dirt when it comes to relationship building and trust. And it just gets better, right? And so very, very proud that the organization that I'm very, again, proud to be a member of, that we're doing that. And again, I know I'm tooting the horn for Sarah, but that was something very clear that she wanted to do, and it's happening. So that's just an amazing thing, and thank God for that. Of course, that's where it's coming from. Uh, so, Rich, what you got, brother? Good seeing you, by the way.
Well, thank you, Scott. Good seeing you also. Whew, April, your story is incredible. Your journey is incredible, uplifting, inspirational, infectious. Uh, what resonated with me, well, a lot of things, but one in particular is who am I? Something that I struggled with for a while. Uh, and then just listening to you, you sit back and you say, you know what? I want what she has. It's just it's incredible, and I'm so glad that uh, my pathway was cleared today, so that I would be able to be on this call to meet you, listen to you, and well, I felt like I've been in church today. God bless. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rich. Thank you. I'm so glad you were here. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Love you there, Rich. We're not going to pass the plate though. But I think that's actually already happened, right? I think we've got something to lead with here, which is a good thing. Okay. Well, anyone else? We got a couple more folks that are on live with us. Anyone like to comment or have any questions? Give you a couple seconds to think about it.
I'd like to chime in.
Sure. Go ahead, Chris.
April, you mentioned that when we have an intersection with life, that's the time to embrace being vulnerable and obviously embrace the emotion. I think this platform is a collaboration for everybody. If we can communicate that to our clients, but more importantly, keep checking in to build up each other, because this is a church. You don't have to have a building to have a church. This discussion here is a church. And I always say I'm on a Holy Spirit journey, and it hasn't left my body yet. I don't know where it's going to lead. But I just pray each day that whoever is placed in front of me, I have the wisdom to pass on the knowledge of Christ. And you certainly reinforced that today. So I wanted to thank you for your tenacity and your studies, but more importantly, your sense of connection with others. Obviously, you have that gift, and I applaud you for that.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you.
That was very nice, Chris. Chill bumps, man. Okay. Well, I see Michelle, you've unmuted, so I will let you have the floor here.
So I love this, April, and I wasn't really sure what angle you guys were gonna take with April in the conversation today, but I thought this was great. And I have my page of notes, which is typical whenever I can come on to a call. So I love to have these little nuggets that I'm gonna chew on. But you talked about with being vulnerable and taking a risk. And when you have someone to provide that cover, what would that then look like? And you literally spoke to my heart at that point because my husband provided that cover for me and was probably one of the first human beings in my entire life to provide cover and then not run away screaming. And so it was so great to hear you acknowledge that because I think for the protector population, both veterans and first responders, we need to approach it with that mindset of like, well, hold on. If you take the risk, do you have your cover? Do you have your person? And so I love that. And my husband told me this week he came across King Arthur thing that he used to tell his soldiers or his knights to go find the Holy Grail and go search in the forest and to start at the places that it looks the darkest to you. And the idea is to, I had to like pull up the text of what my husband said to me so I don't butcher it. But he said the idea is that to find what it is you're looking for, or to find what it is you're looking for starts at the place you don't want to go. And I was like, man, that is powerful. And then you pair that with what you said about taking risk and having that cover. And I just, like I said, you left me with a lot to chew on. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. It's so, I think you're so right in terms of figuring out where you are, what space you're in. That makes a huge difference. Being willing, to say, hey, growth begins at the edge of your comfort zone. So there are places where you need to do that. And at the same time, it's good to be smart. Because you brought up the King Arthur thing, what's coming to mind, one of the analogies I use with vulnerability is the idea of this knight in shining armor, right? You picture him in his suit of armor. On the battlefield, that is 100% necessary, and you want to keep that armor on because it's going to save your life. Now picture the same guy in the same suit of armor in the bedroom with his lady fair. Okay? Like that what was saving his life on the battlefield is going to kill intimacy at home, right? And so being able to say like, "Hey, who am I with? Am I in a safe space? Am I in a place where the goal is to build connection, where the goal is intimacy? And if that's the case, then it's okay then I need to take my armor off in order to reach that goal. Because otherwise it's going to interfere with the connection and with the joy of that relationship, but to realize like, hey, but by the way, you don't take your armor off everywhere, like, and so figuring out, okay, what room am I in, who's in the room, and giving yourself that freedom. It's not an all or nothing. It's like it's kind of this little slider, to figure out who am I with. And so I'm so glad you got to experience that with your husband, of him being one of those people. Because I think one of the things that happens so often is like if we have a bad experience, I know some people have been vulnerable and it's been used against them, or it's been weaponized, or somebody's had, taken advantage, or taken something you shared that was precious and personal, and then it's been misused or used against you. And so I think the immediate thing is like, well, I'm never going to do that again, and we can make those kind of powerful decisions that get globalized. And so to be able to say like, hey, even if I've had a bad experience, that doesn't mean that they're all going to be bad. And so that's you being able to say, hey, even though I've had people run in the past, I'm going to be brave enough on this one. I'm going to put my heart out there again. I'm going to have courage to take that risk. And you found out, oh, not everybody does run away. There is somebody who will love me and cover me and stay. And so I'm so glad you got to have that experience. I appreciate you sharing that.
Amen to that. The courage piece there is absolutely it's a necessary thing to have courage and to step out like that. Um, I think that's probably a good note to transition here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand it back to Barry, and he'll close this out. And I'm sure he's going to want to hear if you have any last sage words for us to understand and live by here. So Barry, I'm going to give you the horn here, brother.
Well, I chatted to April, and we're saving the best for last. April wrote something, and her response to me when she was going to write it was, like most people will go, I'm just going to think about it. She went, I'm going to go talk to God. That about took 5 minutes, and out came the most beautiful, beautiful piece of writing. So I thought perhaps if we could finish off on that, and then we could sort of bid farewell to each other. April, you cool with that?
I'm great with it. Yes.
Okay.
And for what it's worth, when Barry first asked me to do this, I was like, wow, this feels vulnerable. It feels risky to share something that is from my heart. And yet I feel like that's supposed to be my gift today and to lead by example and practice what I preach. So I would be happy to share it with you. It's
Yeah,
I
please.
believe it was a gift from God to me, and I want it to flow to you. So, and this is in the context of the letters that Barry is collecting for those who are feeling alone. This is what came to me when I thought about what I wanted to write to the one who feels alone. Dear one, there is presence in the silence. In the dark, where you feel alone, there is presence. It's the same presence that was there in the dark, in the emptiness before the world began. That presence is with you now and is as close as your turned attention, closer than your next breath. In fact, to connect with that presence, all you have to do is breathe. But don't just take a breath, receive it. Receive your next breath from the source of all life. The one who breathed life into the very first human being is breathing life into you now. The breath is spirit, and the spirit is with you now, filling your lungs with life, filling your life with fresh hope. Hope to believe that maybe you're not alone, because you're not. Breathe in life. Breathe in hope. Breathe in love. The presence is love. Love that never leaves you alone. Love that demands nothing but wants to give you everything your soul longs for. Love that sees your pain and looks on you with compassion. No judgment, no reason for shame. Love that sees the pain and foolishness behind every bad thing you've ever done and forgives you fully, aching for you to forgive yourself. Love that sees who you're created to be and believes that you still can be. You are that person. For it was love who created you. You were created by love, for love. Alone is a lie that wars against the essence of your existence. It dissolves in the light of truth. The truth that you are loved by love itself, the source of all love in the universe. That love loves you. That love is God, source, spirit, presence, the one, God. Not an impersonal force and not merely the universe. The one who created the universe, who had an idea for it and made it happen. The one who created you had an idea for you and made you happen because you matter, no matter what the story was with your parents. For you see, your parents are not really your parents. Well, they are, but they're not. They're not really where you came from. They're just the folks you came through. But your real dad is God. No matter what kind of dad you had on this planet, your real dad is out of this world, literally. And no matter what you may have heard, he's the most loving daddy of all the daddies. Seriously. Let that sink in. And I'm sorry if some folks have trash talked your dad and given him a bad rap. Let's set the record straight. He's not distant. He's not an angry punisher, and he's not mad at you. He just wants to be with you so much that he would do anything and give anything to make it happen. And the good news is that he already did. The better news is that there's nothing he cannot save you from. No hole too black, no mess too big. His name actually means God saves. So there's no place you can go on this earth or in the depths of your own soul that he cannot save you from. And he wants to. He's a good guy like that. He wants to be your hero, and he wants to be your friend, your best friend. The kind who's always there, doesn't get mad when you do stupid stuff, and always loves you no matter what. The kind who will still show up for you, even when you've turned your back on him, and not even hold it against you. He just patiently waits for you to come back around. Because love is patient. That's who he is and what he does. So he waits. And he's waiting for you now. Waiting for you to say yes. Yes to love. Yes to life. Yes to being with him. Yes to letting him help you and guide you. He's got these distinct advantages of being omniscient and omnipotent as well as omnipresent, so it turns out to be a really good deal, especially since he is love, and therefore he can't do anything selfish or manipulative or anything that's not for your benefit. He literally can't. It would go against his nature and tear the fabric of who he is as a being. And given the fact that he's the only uncreated being, that's saying something. His loving nature won't allow him to do anything that isn't love. There aren't words enough or time enough to tell you all the benefits that he wants to bring into your life, all the goodness that he's already planted inside you, that he wants to draw forth, so much so that you will be amazed at yourself and who he made you to be. It starts with unconditional love, indestructible joy, and militant peace, no matter the circumstance, and an absolute drive to set all things right and as they should be. Not to mention piling on hope that rises, abundance that overflows, and miracles that will touch your heart and blow your mind. That's just the beginning. And we never really come to the end of his goodness. He set it up so that we get to spend all of eternity seeing it unveiled, wave after wave, forever. So, friend, we've got plenty of time to discover the blessings and treasures with your name on them. But for today, know that you are a treasure in the eyes of the one who made you. Receive his love as you receive the breath. And receive his love through me as these words were written for you, from my heart to yours. I hope one day I'll get to meet you. And I hope today this meets you right where you are to remind you that you are not alone, even in the dark. You have friends you haven't met yet, and I'm one of them. So if it helps, know that I am holding you in my heart. I'm praying for you and sending hugs your way. Heaven's sending hugs too, along with angels specifically assigned to you. Yes, you. Your divine assignment isn't finished yet. You're here for a reason. And if you don't know what that is yet, perhaps you'll find out soon. Even if your soul forgot, your spirit will remember. May the dark place you were in be a little lighter now, and growing lighter all the time. Less heavy and less dark. Lighter, lighter, lighter still, a divine awakening. An awakening to who you are and what you've always known. An awakening to the one who loves you most and to your place in the grand story. He's made 100 billion of us so far, and you're not like anyone else. You're uniquely created to reflect facets of God's character and nature in ways that no one else can. So without you, we all miss out on a little piece of God. No pressure. That'll come through naturally just by you being you and being who you are as you let him live inside you. Simply receive the breath and life and love and the rest will take care of itself. So rest now, friend. Rest in knowing you are loved by God and by me. With unwavering hope and deep affection, April.
April. That is just extraordinary. And I think for anybody who tunes in to the recording, start from the end, then go back and listen from the beginning. But I really want to thank you for coming on today, for sharing what you've shared, for your service and the gifts that you do bring to the veteran and first responder population, and really for reminding us that until we open our hearts, if all we are relying on is on our tools, then we're missing the point. That as long as the heart is present in the connection with the people we sit, what you use afterwards is neither here nor there. But without the heart connection and the love that should be there, healing doesn't really happen. So perhaps one day universities will have a special training program for helping clinicians to open their hearts. Many of them do, and many of them don't. So something to think about in time. But thank you for everything you brought today. And thank you, everybody here today, for just sharing your hearts and your questions and engaging in probably one of the most beautiful conversations I think I've been witness to. I think, Sarah, Scott, would you like to finish off? You do that rather well. And then close the recording.
Okay, yes, sounds good. Thanks, Barry. I do have two saved rounds. One, I should have mentioned this. So again, those who will be tuning in that maybe haven't been part of this program, Michelle, who was the last person you saw that had a question and commented as well. She is with the Power Story. In fact, she does all of our media. And she does a lot of problem solving and a lot of jumping in, putting fires out. Very smart woman, and we're blessed to have her. She's a big part of all the things that happen behind the scenes to get cameras rolling here with the right folks on. So thank you, Michelle. And then last thing, I don't know whether this was talked before I came on in the pre-recording. We do have a Bible study that we have online. It's Wednesday mornings, 8 a.m. West Coast time, U.S. West Coast time. So you can do the math and figure out where you are when. But I just want to invite you, April, if you ever have time on a Wednesday morning to just tune in. We can provide you the link to that, Sarah or Michelle or me or whatever. But it's an amazing place, and I think you would certainly enjoy your time there. So standing offer. So, well, folks, this has been a remarkable session here. I personally am so glad I was able to make it. Being on the East Coast instead of the West Coast, I'm on travel, seeing family. My mom hasn't been well, so my wife, my daughters, my oldest daughter, her fiance, and parents are going to be out here as well. We're spending Christmas with my mom and my dad and my brother. But anyhow, it's a great thing. I'm very blessed that we're all able to do this. And I want to thank you again, April. I can't really top anything Barry said, but this has been a great experience, and I'm very thankful that I was able to be part of it. I certainly would go and find the recording and watch it then. And in fact, I'll do it again because this is very powerful. But I want to thank everyone for being on. Merry Christmas. This is an extremely important part of the year. That and Easter are, kind of up there in the top. They rival each other, but he's the reason for the season. I hope everyone enjoys their time. Hopefully they can be with family. Let's keep folks that are in service that or wherever they are in the world, keep them in prayer. And for the folks that struggle, keep them in prayer as well. And we just hope that God continues to work in our lives and helps lead us in the direction that He's prompting us to go into. Like you said, April, that that we see those things and we hear them. And then, like Michelle said, we have the courage to step out there and follow the path that's being laid out for us. So with that, thank you guys so much. We will see you next time on Veterans in Conversation. Thank you.